54 million views. Almost exactly 5 years ago, when I was 17, I posted a video on TikTok that more people than the entire population of Canada would watch. The video shows my process of creating an acrylic painting, which depicts an ashen figure curled in a fetal position, ensnared by a swirling mass of red tendrils coalescing into contradiction. A nurturing womb or a torturing trap? Bestowing life or depleting it? I entitled the piece, Mother. My mom never wanted children. She was too strong-willed, too independent. She always thought she'd make a terrible mother. But my dad threatened to divorce her if she didn't bear his children, so here I am. My mom never wanted children, and she reminds me of it. I hate you. I don't want you anymore. Go fuck yourself. I will never speak a word to you again. You're the reason I'm depressed. You are the one who makes this family unhappy. You are the one who makes me unhappy. And if you're unhappy, it's all on you. She's the reason I used to cry myself to sleep and hyperventilate in school bathrooms. At the end of 9th grade, I came in 20 minutes late to my physics final, sobbing because she was screaming at me and refused to take me to school until she was done. It's not always like this, though. Sometimes the turbulent sea calms and sunlight peeks through the suffocating clouds, and in the brief tranquility, I allow myself to hope. Stupid hope. Seems like I never learned my lesson. I love my mom, and I know she loves me too. But she's also the person I fear most in the world. By my junior year of high school, I'd practically abandoned art. The haunting penumbra of college applications loomed over my future. I could not afford to give into hedonistic pursuits. I had to focus on the debate and varsity tennis teams I captained, the feminist club I founded, the school council I sat on, the event committees I chaired, the nonprofit organization I ran. I had to prioritize my AP classes and my scholarship essays, and not some silly little childhood pastime that once brought me joy. Art was not a viable vocation. It was frivolous, indulgent, peripheral. I watched my passion erode into sand and slip through the cracks of my fingers. When I was in middle school, drawing was almost an obsession. I spent every spare minute wielding my colored pencils like supernatural weapons that endowed invincibility. Every other weekend, when I packed for the 30-minute journey to my dad's house, my art supplies would occupy a greater volume of my rainbow-striped suitcase than would my clothes. I would carefully pad my Prismacolor pencil and Copic marker and Cotman watercolor sets with thick sweatpants and rolled-up t-shirts, a bird protecting her fragile, precious eggs. I deeply dreaded these bi-monthly visits to the too big house that folded its arms and turned its back to me. I would spend those weekends tiptoeing through dark hallways and seeking refuge in my bedroom, hiding from my hostile stepmother and complicit father, relishing the loyal companionship of my alcohol markers and my wax-based colored pencils and my synthetic sable watercolor brushes. With crisp white paper splayed before me, I could run away without ever leaving my desk. I drew invented manga characters, even though I'd never read manga nor watched anime. I drew eyes, a shit ton of eyes. I drew for school projects and school yearbooks. I drew portraits for my friends, pet drawings for my friends, bat mitzvah cards and birthday cards, and more bat mitzvah cards for my friends. My dad would try to coax me out of my cloister, decrying the excessive art making that rendered me a recluse. My mom was even less supportive. Despite my best efforts to win her over, every time she caught me engaging in what she deemed a pointless endeavor, she would berate me for wasting time, commanding me to get up and do something productive. If I had all this free time, why wasn't I weeding the front lawn, bleaching the kitchen counter, vacuuming the basement carpet? My efforts were ultimately futile, in her opinion, because her daughter was no Picasso. Coldly assessing my hyper-realistic colored pencil renderings, she would often inform me, "You have skill, but no originality. You are not a creative person." In her eyes, I wasn't meant to be an artist. Inevitably, these sentiments wormed their way into my psyche. I came to believe that art had no utility, that it was superfluous, that it made no tangible impact on the world. At that time, I considered legitimate only the kind of output compatible with the demands of capitalism. And so, As my academics and extracurriculars intensified, I stopped making time for art. I allowed it to unspool from the fabric of my identity. What had once been an integral component of my life shrank down into a rare extravagance. It took a global pandemic to bring me back. In 2020, the year that time warped and stretched like putty, and the word unprecedented bounced around our discourse like a ping pong ball on the loose, I found myself painting again. When, for the first time, the pace of life relented and gave me space to breathe, my fingers itched for a brush to hold. Tasting my first morsel after a prolonged and painful fast, I began to create. Non-stop, ravenously, urgently. Holed up in the musty basement with the collapsed and leaking ceiling, alongside my rodent and arachnid companions, I turned out 74 paintings that year. I painted from sunup to sundown with frenzied energy, even during my Zoom lectures on The Great Gatsby's green light metaphor and the 18th century persecution of the French Huguenots. Every day, I awoke bursting with excitement to greet the canvas once again. I could do this for the rest of my life, I thought. And then, I burned out. After my 9-month art bender, I was suddenly seized by an inexplicable and overwhelming dread. Even just thinking about painting sent anxiety jolting up my spine. What began as cathartic became arduous and excruciating. Like each time I put brush to canvas, I was carving into my own flesh. Liberation turned to labor. Companion turned to adversary. The betrayal was devastating. But before that, TikTok. When buzz about the app first started echoing across the halls of my high school, I adamantly refused to join the bandwagon that more and more of my classmates were climbing aboard. I was not interested in influencer makeup tutorials and shopping hauls, not interested in overdramatic 30-second story times, not interested in teenagers shaking their asses to formulaic pop songs. At least I haven't hopped on TikTok yet, I would often say as a facetious expression of resilience amidst struggle, as in, I might be in the trenches, but shit could be worse. And then, the haze of quarantine aimlessness scrambled my brains, weakened my resolve. So in late March of 2020, I finally accepted my Gen Z fate, joining my chronically online peers in their all-consuming vortices of infinite scrolling. My very formation as an artist is inextricably enmeshed in the sticky threads of the World Wide Web. Before TikTok, I'd already been posting my art on social media for years. In 5th grade, at age 10, my friend peer pressured me into joining her on Instagram, where she posted pictures of her sketches and doodles. Weakling that I was, I caved with barely any resistance, downloading the app on my sky blue iPhone 5C and creating an art account of my own. The drawings once nestled in the folds of my sketchbook were now packaged into little squares in a digital grid, private creations now on public view. There was no more room for the ugly, the messy, the experimental. I had to make things shining with smooth polish, things worthy of posting. I started drawing my favorite celebrities, various detached body parts, and a lot of food. What I made and shared began to be shaped by trends and likes and hashtags, by the artsy aesthetics of the Instagram vernacular. My own creative vision began to be clouded by the murky specter of being perceived. Thus, I was accustomed to the unique pressures of being an artist on the internet, but nothing could prepare me for the torment of TikTok. In the beginning, I was just having fun, posting pure silliness, paintings of SpongeBob and Peppa Pig adorned with gold leaf backgrounds like they were Byzantine icons. I shared the evolution of my hideous self-portraits over the years. I painted photo booth pictures with my best friend, adorned the pockets of old mom jeans with flowers. translated pixelated memes into pigment on canvas. I celebrated when I hit 20 followers, imagining my entire math class congregated together to watch me make art. 20 whole people. But before I knew it, 20 became 100, 100 became 1,000, 1,000 became 100,000, then 300,000. And then I posted the mother video. My final painting of 2020, completed just minutes before the clock struck midnight on the last day of that hellish year. It blew up instantly. Literally overnight, my follower count skyrocketed to 1 million. Outweighing the thrill of sudden stardom was a dense, sticky guilt that lodged itself deep in my chest, turning exhales into exertion. Was I milking my trauma for clout? How could I expose my mom like that? Air our family's dirty laundry in the most public of squares, the omnipresent and indelible digital world. But at the same time, I felt like after everything I've been through, I needed this outlet of catharsis. In The Birth of Tragedy, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche employs 2 Greek deities to embody opposite poles of the creative process. Apollo, the god of knowledge, healing, music, light, and Dionysus, the god of wine, debauchery, festivity, madness. Nietzsche called these 2 artistic impulses the Apollonian, representing order, harmony, clarity, logic, and the Dionysian, disarray, dissolution, discord, darkness. It's the scintillating magic of art that can cloak an enchanting Apollonian illusion over the Dionysian chaos of reality, transfiguring suffering into something bearable, something beautiful even. We need art to survive. I needed it to survive. There was something empowering and redeeming in sublimating pain into paint. So I carried on. I made pieces and wrote poems about my destructive perfectionism that bred internal chaos despite external control. I made art about depression and binge eating, about sexism and beauty standards, about my confused and tenuous sense of racial identity. I spoke aloud the painful things, the awful things, the shameful things that most clutch deeply within. I received the most moving messages from all over the world. So many people told me that I made them feel seen. That I moved them to tears. That I helped them through heartache. That I made them look at the world in a new way. That I was the reason why they started making art again. Thousands bought my paintings and prints from as far as Switzerland, Indonesia, Iceland. Young students from England and Portugal and Mozambique interviewed me for their research projects. Prepubescent teenagers told me they looked up to me. Postmenopausal mothers told me I helped them understand their wayward sons. Art teachers showed my work in their high school classrooms. Budding artists made pieces inspired by mine. Someone in Germany bought a 7-inch tall meme painting for over $200 in an eBay auction fundraiser I created for a women's shelter in Boston. An indigenous woman from Nevada saved up money from scholarships to buy one of my paintings because it spoke to her so personally. Multiple people asked permission to get my artwork tattooed on their bodies, to etch my creations forever into their skin. It was all so beautiful. It was all such a blessing. It was all too much. The imperative to produce was paralyzing. I had to post and post and post, or else the unforgiving algorithm would leave me in the dust. The standards I held myself to escalated exponentially. Each painting had to be better than the last, each narrative more moving and profound. But beyond the inner turmoil, it was the voyeuristic scrutiny that eviscerated me. Bearing my soul again and again, subjecting messy emotion to the quantified metrics of views and likes and shares, began to take its toll. Trauma doesn't translate well into performance analytics. At the end of the day, people come to TikTok to be entertained. I was offering the most tender parts of me on a gleaming platter for strangers to tear apart with glee. I was reading an intimate diary out loud through a megaphone to an apathetic crowd, a crowd that could collectively wield the power to build you to the clouds or topple you to the ground. There were the people who laughed when I cried. The people who stole my words, stole my art, stole my identity. The people who called me a narcissist, who called me boring, who called me extra, the people who claimed I was attention-seeking, who accused me of fabrication, who deemed my art too depressing, the people who said I was spouting bullshit, who told me to stay in my lane, who declared I was so wretched I needed aid from the divine. And the people who pointed out that, oh, she's Asian, so of course she works so hard, it destroys her. Those damn Asians. Arrogant, dumb bitches. There was the art school student who replicated my idea and passed it off as her own. There was the guy who bought my painting and gifted it to an icon of the right-wing manosphere. There was the pervert who infiltrated the inbox of my school email. He asked if he could date me, and I said, no, you cannot, but you can buy my art. Here's my website. He said he would love to buy my art, but only if I had sex with him at a swingers club. And then he proceeded to harass me for weeks. It was all so terrible. It was all such a curse. It was all too much. At that point in my life, boundaries were a concept foreign to me. I overshared as a means of coping, shining a flashlight under my bed to prove no monster was lurking. I was a lost and hurting teenager who wanted to make something of her suffering, who needed desperately to imbue it with some kind of meaning. But my wounds remained raw and bleeding. I should have let them scab over and flake off with time, but I didn't know how. So I exposed myself to fire because I thought cauterizing was a substitute for healing. These days, I'm rarely on social media, and my life is better for it. When I do post, I still explore my experiences with depth and candor, but the stakes feel so much lower. Shit is just not that serious anymore. As an adult with a big girl frontal lobe, I am far less shaken by the unwarranted cruelty and unsolicited judgment that comes my way. My self-worth is no longer so entangled in how my creations are received. In other words, I have no more fucks left to give. And I think they call that growth. No longer flailing against vicious, biting winds, I stand grounded and tranquil in the eye of the storm. I've learned to be more judicious in my sharing, more deliberate, more protective. I share because I want to, not because I'm aching for the world's validation. I want to make art that others can understand. I want to talk about the big scary things that so many people feel but might not know how to articulate. I want to normalize vulnerability because vulnerability is the scaffolding that builds bridges between us. So I continue to make art. I continue to tell stories. I continue to move forward. And I leave my TikTok era far behind.